I just love this game. I just love being out there making plays and just just making my family
At the
proud.
end of the
So.
day, I think all teams want to invest in a great person as well as great talent.
That's
What I
true.
would say,
Yeah,
my
just
athletic.
be able to move sideline to
Big man.
sideline. A lot of guys, that's what we strive for. Just hawking down, making
In the
plays.
NFL, making open field tackles,
Yeah.
So everybody can work on open field tackling, but I think to make me stay in the NFL, get to that second contract, is definitely open field tackling.
I like
My
that.
script is,
And I just got a lot of tools in my bag when it comes down to moves that I can do and how I can defend.
Yeah, I probably never lost the swag, but I do want to show people who the best defensive player is in the
But just my violence and my effort, nonstop. I feel like pass rushers rarely win their rushes on their first move, right? So it's just that second move, that third move, that tenacity, just to keep getting to the quarterback.
The combine is behind us and free agency is well underway. The Lions have made a flurry of moves, and the holes in the roster and needs are starting to take shape. This is a great time to dive back into an updated mock draft 2.0. Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, Johnny Gaz. Thank you for returning for another video. Let's first update on the flurry of moves that have already been made here in this early free agent period. Then we'll talk about and reset the Lions roster and the needs or holes that they still have to fill. Then we'll dive into another mock draft simulation. Let's go. The biggest domino to fall outside of the Lions organization this weekend prior to the opening of free agency was the Myles Garrett saga. Will he or won't he return to Cleveland? And it really looked as if he didn't want to come back. He wanted to be a part of a winner, but I guess there is a dollar amount that can satisfy even a player in that position, and Myles Garrett decides to return and re-sign with the Cleveland Browns on a 4-year deal worth an average of $40 million per year, $123 million guaranteed, the biggest contract paid to a non-quarterback in NFL history. And so it's very clear to see why the Lions were never going to make that move. There's no way they were going to be able to pay both of their edge rushers $40 million average per year and think they were going to continue to keep players in the organization. It just wasn't going to happen. Certainly other players, other defensive linemen in the NFL are very happy with this contract because it certainly resets the market and it will dictate what the Lions will do with Aiden Hutchinson and his contract situation either this year or next year. Free agent cornerback Carlton Davis was sending out a lot of cryptic tweets and other messages that seemed to indicate that he would not be returning to the Lions and that he would be seeking a maximum contract, and that is exactly what he did. Carlton Davis ends up signing with the New England Patriots on a 3-year, $54 million deal worth almost $20 million per year. The Lions, in turn, make their big splash move of the free agent period so far and sign cornerback DJ Reed from the New York Jets. He signs on a 3-year, $48 million contract, and he was considered the top cornerback on the free agent market outside of potentially Carlton Davis. It is really a very good one-for-one swap for the Lions, but more than anything, they save money in this deal. It ends up being kind of saving, in the end of things, $12 million or $4 million per year over the course of DJ Reed's contract compared to what they would have paid Carlton Davis. He certainly went and earned his money. That's what he said he was going to do, and he did that, and I have no hard feelings against a guy looking to make his money, but I think the Lions made the smart move. They went out and got what they thought was the top corner on the market. He's a little bit smaller than Carlton Davis, but he's just as feisty. But more important than anything, he's more available than Carlton Davis ever was. I think the stat was Carlton Davis has never played more than 80 or 82% of games in any one season. Well, DJ Reed has been really very consistent and very available and is kind of the opposite situation of Carlton Davis as far as injury concern. So the Lions bring in a very reliable, available cornerback, a guy that will move into that number one position and allow Terry and Arnold and Enos Rakestraw to learn from him, to continue to grow and have another season to cultivate their defensive backfield. In a more surprising move, the Lions cut ties with edge Zadarius Smith, who they brought in mid-season last year to sort of make up for a lot of the injury concerns they had across the defensive line and on defense. Overall, the Lions end up saving almost $11 million over the next 2 years by cutting Zadarius before the start of the new league year. I think there were just too many incentives and too many roster bonuses for them to consider based on the production that they thought they were going to get out of Zadarius Smith. So as much as Detroit fans seemed to like him and he did seem to fit, he was a locker room guy, They did end up cutting ties. In turn, the Lions re-signed often injured edge Marcus Davenport, and it's a very organizational-friendly deal. It's a one-year deal worth up to $4.75 million, somewhere in there. But really, in the end of it, they're only paying him somewhere in the area of $2 million. And really, I think what they're trying to do is just continue to cultivate edge depth. I don't think that's the final piece by any means. And with his injury history, they don't expect to get a full season of true dominant productivity out of Marcus Davenport. But I think based on the number, based on the high upside that you could get out of him if he does stay healthy, it is, to me, a no-brainer at that dollar amount. The Lions had also cut ties with longtime linebacker Jalen Reeves-Maybin. In turn, they re-signed 3 different linebackers just prior to the free agent period. Linebacker Ezekiel Turner, Anthony Pittman, and most notably Derrick Barnes, who went out with an injury in week 3 of the 2024 season and did not come back. He returns on a 3-year deal, $25.5 million, which is a pretty big number considering he hasn't given a ton of productivity. Didn't really give anything last year after the injury, but he is an organizational guy. He's been a long-term Lion. He was a original draft pick of Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, and they really like their homegrown guys. He had a kind of a breakout year at the end of 2023 and had the unfortunate injury, so they're hoping to get a lot more out of him, and they're certainly going to need to get that based on that number. They seem to have a lot of faith in linebacker Derrick Barnes. Lions are also retaining guard Netane Muti on a 1-year deal, and most recently have decided to re-sign swing tackle and longtime Lion Dan Skipper. Another 1-year deal. The contract terms have not been released as of this recording, but he is a vital piece to the Lions organization. He was kind of their jumbo set package guy. He's been their swing tackle for several years, and they certainly want to maintain their offensive line depth, and he's a big piece to that. And so they will retain him for another year and continue to build on their offensive line. There seemed to be a lot of panic in Motown up until this most recent move, and it doesn't solve all of the problems for the Lions defensively. I think they still have their most major need up front on the defensive line. Re-signing Marcus Davenport is not a true fix. It's just a part, I think, of the bigger plan. And there may be a bigger move out there to be made yet still. There are still some free agents out there, and there might still be a trade for, let's say, a Trey Hendrickson available to the Lions. Now, history would say that Brad Holmes doesn't make that sort of deal, but Trey Hendrickson may not demand, Myles Garrett money. He's certainly not going to demand that kind of money. So we'll see what's left of free agency, but I still think the Lions' most pressing need is on their defensive line, another edge opposite of Aiden Hutchinson, and I think they still need help at defensive tackle. Outside of that, I do still think they need to continue to build on the offensive line. As of this recording, the Lions still have not re-signed Kevin Zeitler. I don't know if he'll be looking to sign outside of the organization. There's been talks about going to Chicago and joining Ben Johnson in that offense, so we'll see what comes out of that. But even so, I think the Lions need to continue to address their offensive line. You have Christian Mahogany coming up at guard. You have the aging Graham Glasgow. So the question there is, does he fill that spot? If Zeitler doesn't re-sign, does it force you to have to go out and get a free agent so that you have a little bit more of a veteran presence along with all of the other All-Pros and Pro Bowlers you have already? But I still think it's just so important to continue to reinvest in the offensive line and build that quality depth. With the departure of Carlton Davis, I think the Lions did an excellent job of filling that need immediately with the signing of DJ Reed. And I don't think it's making the Lions defense leaps and bounds better. DJ Reed is a smaller cornerback, but he's still a good man-to-man player. He can play zone, and he's not afraid to put his nose in there in the run game. So I think he will fill in well as a number 1 cornerback. He's reliable, and he'll be available. He'll also allow Terrion Arnold and those depth pieces to grow behind him. It also takes away the pressing need in the draft for the Lions to address cornerback, and I don't think it would be unbeneficial for them to take another young corner to continue to groom and grow. But I think you've set your cornerback room up for the future, so that takes that out of that third pressing need. I think then you can insert the need at wide receiver. As of this recording, the Lions also have not re-signed Tim Patrick. So they may have a need for a bigger-bodied wide receiver here in the draft. And with the moves now that they've made in free agency, that makes it more of an opportunity for them to address here earlier and often in this upcoming draft. Let me know down in the comments below, with the moves the Lions have made already in free agency, who should the Lions take with pick 28? Let's dive into my mock draft 2.0 and find out who I would take for the Lions here in the upcoming NFL draft. The rules for this mock draft sim is that we will do a 4-round mock draft for the Detroit Lions. We will not accept any sort of trades here for this mock draft. I'm using the Pro Football Network mock draft sim, which I will post the link in the description down below. And we will stick to the Lions plan as it stands as of this recording. We just laid out the Lions' needs there, and I still think the biggest need is up front on the defensive line. And the way that this particular mock draft sim fell is, I think, a great situation for the Lions if this ends up being the case. A couple players that went off the board that I like: the defensive tackle Derrick Harmon here to the Bucks, Jihad Campbell, the linebacker, to the Denver Broncos. Then it seemed to be kind of offensive line heavy there. Josh Simmons, Gray Zabel, who I really love with his size, and then Tyler Booker out of Alabama, which then puts the Lions up at pick 28. And there's a few players that I like here. One of the ones is defensive tackle Kenneth Grant, who's a huge space-eating defensive tackle. I think it would be a great addition next to Aleem McNeil and DJ Reader. You also have the offensive lineman Donovan Jackson, who I think would be a great insert at guard. If you had to fill a need there at starter and you needed somebody there, I think that would be a perfect fit from Ohio State. I like Mike Green, the edge, but I think more than anything, if Nick Scorton, the edge out of Texas A&M, is available for the Lions at pick 28, I think you run your card up there and grab him. He's a physical specimen. He's NFL pro ready. I think he'd be a great bookend to Aiden Hutchinson. He's got the right size and speed and power that you're looking for. And I think it's just a no-brainer at that point. I would take, at pick 28, Nick Scorton, the edge out of Texas A&M. Now let's move into the second round. Lions pick at number 60, and we went with the first pick at 28 with the edge, Nick Scorton. So I think kind of our draft board's wide open at this point. I said our biggest need is for the Lions is most likely now on the offensive line, and there's a lot of options available there. But I think you also could go back to the defensive line if you really just wanted to go all in, like kind of like the Lions did last year. They went cornerback. Well, to me, you could go defensive line here with a guy like Deion Walker, who is 6'7", 331. He is huge, just massive. You talk about a space eater. This is the ultimate space eater. But is he too top heavy? Is he more Broderick Martin than Aleem McNeil? You know what I mean? And this guy's much bigger than Aleem McNeil. So again, I think you have a ton of upside, but I think it's kind of a project piece. But he could fit in well as a scheme fit here for the Lions. Because again, you don't need him to come in and dominate up front. You got DJ Reader, you got the returning Aleem McNeil. So you got a lot of options. You also have a guy out of Texas who the Lions have a lot of relationship with, Alfred Collins, another massive guy, 6'5", 332. But again, might need some time, but could be a great scheme fit for the Lions. So you have a lot of great choices there. But I think the need really, though, is to continue to reinvest in your offensive line. We don't know what the Lions will continue to do in free agency. There could be a big move still there. Could be a light move. It's hard to tell. Ultimately, I don't see the Lions making some big splash move. So I think we stick to what the Lions' true needs are, and I think reinvesting in the O-line is huge. So to me, a guy like Josh Connerly Jr. out of Oregon, 6'4", 311, athletic, I think is a better tackle at this point than he would be able to step in and just be a guard. So it doesn't necessarily fill the exact need that the Lions will need this season, but there's been some talk about moving on from Taylor Decker at some point. Whether that be in a trade right away. I mean, he is getting a little bit older, and you have him for a few more years signed, but you want to still build behind him. So could a guy like Josh Connerly be the right fit as a replacement tackle, or maybe he's able to fill in at some other positions across the offensive line as he kind of waits his turn to become a starter. So for me, that's the guy here at pick 60, coming off of the edge and solidifying your defensive line. Now I'm going over to the offensive line. I'm going to take the tackle out of Oregon, Josh Connerly Jr. Let's move into the third round. Lions picking at the end of the third, pick 101. We started off pick 28 with the edge, Nick Scorton, then followed up on the offensive line with Josh Connerly Jr. So it's kind of an open book to us now as far as where the Lions can go from here. And this is where I think you look now for your offensive weapon. You could go back to your defensive line again. Again, if you want to double dip in a couple places, you have a guy like Joshua Farmer, a little bit on the smaller side for a defensive tackle, but very athletic. I've looked at Zy Alexander out of LSU in the past, but again, I think with the DJ Reed acquisition, that becomes less of a need here. But in the wide receiver pool, I think you have a guy like Jack Besh, which is a little bit on the smaller side as far as your ex-wide receiver replacement for Tim Patrick. He's only 6'1", 214, but he's smart. He's physical, good hands. He's got a tough story, obviously. You don't have to get into that, but inspiring as far as what he was able to do at the Senior Bowl. And I think he's going to bring a lot of good family and good organizational things to the Lions if you're able to bring a guy like that in. But I think there's kind of I don't want to say a project piece because I don't know if the Lions are in the mode of bringing in project pieces offensively, but I like Arondé Gadsden out of Syracuse. He's kind of a hybrid wide receiver tight end. He's probably more of a projected tight end, but he would need to really bulk up to fit that role. And we know the Lions don't need a tight end. They have Sam Laporta. But this is a guy 6'4", 243, great hands, able to go up and make plays. I think it would be a good piece to fit into what the Lions need on offense. They don't need a burner. They don't need a slot receiver. So they really need a size, big-bodied ex-wide receiver, especially if Tim Patrick doesn't come back. And I think they could really fit him into that role and use him as sort of that hybrid. You know, that offense, when it was run by Ben Johnson, would really do a lot with tight ends and in the blocking scheme and obviously getting them out as part of the passing game. It sounds like offensive coordinator John Morton's going to be a little bit more pass-heavy, so a guy like this could be very valuable in the Lions offense. Because of that, I would take a shot here at Arondé Gadsden, the wide receiver out of Syracuse. Now looking at the 4th round pick for the Lions, 133. I really had to scan the roster and try to figure out where could we best fill with maybe the best playmaker available. And what I found here is Malachi Moore, the safety out of Alabama, who's played that star position for Alabama, who we know was Brian Branch and some other very famous Alabama players there at safety. Well, he filled that position and filled it well. And he's a playmaking safety. He's more of a zone type safety. But I think that with the Lions shift from Aaron Glenn to Kelvin Shepard, I think there's going to be a heavier focus on the linebacker play. And they're going to be most likely losing safety Ife Melifonwu. So there's going to be a hole there and a need for a depth piece at safety. And I think Malachi Moore might be a guy that you could sort of groom into that sort of zone deep threat piece. And if they need somebody to fill in as a nickel corner, I think he could also fill that role as well. So I think he could fill a lot of spaces there and be a really good piece in the secondary. So to me, if he's available in the 4th round at this point, I would be very happy to take Malachi Moore, the safety out of Alabama. Let's break down my mock draft 2.0. We started off with, I think, still the Lions' biggest need at the edge, opposite Aiden Hutchinson. At pick 28, we took Nick Scorton, the edge out of Texas A&M. I think he's athletic. He's got all of the moves you want. I think he's NFL ready. He inserts as that opposite end, Aiden Hutchinson, day 1. So I think that's definitely the pick there if he is available. Round 2, we went back to the offensive line, reinvesting there at tackle with the Josh Connerly Jr. out of Oregon. I think he could play throughout the offensive line early in his career as he sort of waits his turn. He could take Taylor Decker's spot at some point. If something happens with Taylor Decker, if there's a need at tackle, he could fill in very early on in his career. I think that's a good move for the Lions to reinvest across their offensive line. Then in the 3rd round, pick 101, we took our ex-wide receiver. The Lions go out and get Arondé Gadsden, the wide receiver out of Syracuse. Big body, good hands, athletic, able to make plays. Not super fast or a burner for any reason, but that's not what you need him for. And I think he kind of fills that hybrid wide receiver tight end role that could play a good piece to the Lions offense. And then finally in the 4th round, we reinvested in our defensive backfield, adding an additional safety, Malachi Moore out of Alabama, just the experience there in that star position. We know the Lions like taking players out of Alabama. He'll have a fellow Crimson Tide member, Brian Branch, to learn from and behind there in that safety room already. So I think it would be a great fit. And to me, this would be an excellent draft for the Detroit Lions. It addresses several needs. It reinvests in their offensive line and in their offensive weapons, but it also clearly addresses their defensive line concerns and adds a playmaker in their secondary as a depth piece as well. I would be very happy if the Lions ended up with this. What do you guys think of my mock draft 2.0? Let me know down in those comments. That's going to do it for my mock draft 2.0. What do you think of the Lions free agency so far? Based on what they've done, what does that mean for the upcoming draft for the Detroit Lions? Let me know in those comments down below. I appreciate you guys coming along for another video. If you dig the vibe here at Johnny Gas Sports, please make sure to hit that like button. It's the best free way to help out the channel. I'd also love it if you consider subscribing. We're on the road to 3,000, and I think we will get there now thanks to you guys. More than anything else, make sure to take care of yourself and your mental health. That's more important than anything, and I want to make sure you come back and see me on future videos. If you do want to check me out on any one of my other socials, at Johnny Gas Sports, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, wherever you can find me, at Johnny Gas Sports. There is free content there for you all the time. Thank you guys again. Have a fantastic week ahead. Go Lions.